Hello, Theelbogen here, to my fellow workers in the vineyard, worldwide. Greetings. Today I bring you part 3 of a 3-part talk titled Misogyny, a Feminist Production. If you haven't yet listened to part 1 and part 2, I'd recommend that you do so. Very well. If broad masses of women are passively implicated in the feminist assault upon men, and if such women do not eventually show signs of awakening to the crisis and amending their passivity, then it may be predicted that the sum total of misogyny upon the planet will show a net increase. Over the course of time, women in significant numbers would need to demonstrate that they get it by standing up noisily against feminism and in favor of equitable treatment for men. Failing this, more and more men will conclude A, that most women don't get it, or B, that they do get it but prefer to benefit passively or complicitly from the status quo. Both A and B will foster the growth of disaffection toward females, and men will be the least blameworthy party to the conflict. Assuming certain trajectories, there would be no help for any of this. The only possible help would be to modify the trajectories. Feminism, both openly and covertly, both directly and indirectly, both consciously and unconsciously, encourages the growth of man-hating. It follows, therefore, that a symmetrically corresponding growth of woman-hating ought not only to be anticipated, but positively welcomed by the feminists as symptomatic that feminism has been successful. For it is naturally to be expected that if women hate men, men will reciprocate. And it would surely demand too much of human nature to expect otherwise. It is a simple case of action and reaction. Think about it. When you drive a wedge between Group A and Group B, does it draw those groups closer together, or does it drive them apart? Does it foster trust, or does it foster suspicion? Does it augment the fund of good feeling on both sides, or does it deplete that fund? I know that you know the answer. Jesus Christ said, "Love those who hate you," but that sets the bar unmercifully high for most people. We cannot take for granted that most humans would measure up to such an inhumanly elevated standard, and it would be stupidity of the most blazing kind to construct public policies or cultural institutions upon the back of any such assumption. The popular feminist saying that men must control themselves is a filthy, abhorrent, man-hating maxim. In fact, it is thinly veiled sadism, and more to the point, a license for women to behave sadistically toward men, who must control themselves by turning the other cheek. But again, we mustn't count upon the imitation of Christ as a normal occurrence. A certain number of saintly chaps, no doubt, will obligingly undertake this. However, we mustn't expect the male population at large, in point of statistical averages, to endure any such arrangement of life. Nor would such arrangement generate a stable social order. In my considered opinion, it would generate a social time bomb. Shall we ever hear a feminist declare that women must control themselves? No, we shall never hear a feminist say any such thing, and that is exactly the point. So kindly don't ask me why the growth of misogyny is inexorable under the impulsion of anti-male politics. Puzzle this out for yourself. It is not quantum physics. As anti-male toxins continue building up in the social ecology, predictable consequences will continue to follow. The underlying nature of feminism cannot and will not change. So does anybody care to argue that injecting anti-male toxin into the social ecology will foster a more kindly male attitude toward women? The feminists, or the women's movement, as they have the nerve to call themselves, have made a certain bed for women in general to lie in. And unless women in general wake up to the harsh reality of all this and take a militant stand against it, they shall indeed have no choice but to lie in that bed which their excellent super friends, the feminists, have created for them. It is written in the nature of things. I am the messenger. Don't shoot. If you proclaim that men must clean up their act, without equally proclaiming that women must clean up their act, then in the long run it is not quite reasonable to ask men to clean up their act, is it? I, at any rate, will preach no sermon upon that text, for men are sensitive creatures, and the hypocrisy of this would not be lost upon them, and I would not willingly play the hypocrite in their eyes. We live under extraordinary political circumstances. Things are not normal. The time is out of joint. Oh, very well, so call me a misogynist. It's only a feminist word trick, after all. And if you insist that women don't even need to clean up their act, then I would beg to remind you that some people, including a lot of women, would beg to differ. I would further make plain to you that the time for argument is past, and that those who disagree with you are driven by the power of their convictions. You can stand them up at the gates of hell, and they won't back down. So it looks like you've got a tussle on your hands, and the more you multiply your aggression, the more you will multiply your enemies. Remember that feminism doesn't merely poison the world against men, for in a social ecology, the poison goes everywhere and poisons everybody. I'd like to say poison in, poison out, but in this case the principle does not apply because there is no out for the poison to go to. There is only one social ecology. It stops where the noosphere stops, and so the poison can only accumulate. The good news is that the social ecology can, in time, heal itself, but only if the source of the poison be exposed and rendered inoperative. And I think you know what the source is. It ought to be clear that if you set about to annihilate so-called misogyny from the world by witch-hunting or thought-policing it to death, you will solve absolutely nothing. Instead, you will make the world profoundly more wretched and more conflicted. The mystical affliction will not go away, I can promise you that. And I can promise you more, it will grow and grow. The more you scream and point your finger, the faster and farther it will spread. It is like pestering somebody with the question,
"Why are you so mean?"
and watching that person grow steadily meaner and meaner. Figure it out, moron. No, this misogyny is not the source of the poison. Does misogyny meaningfully exist at all, other than as a feminist propaganda device? That is a serious question and ought to be distributed for general discussion. However, let's wrap this up tersely. The real issue is not misogyny, so-called, but rather ill feeling between the sexes. Between, that is the operative keyword. Any idiot can see it's a two-way street, so I must conclude that the feminists are either lower than idiots or the most evil liars and manipulators ever to walk the planet. Yes, I say it is a two-way street. Bad feeling between the sexes is mutual. They are both giving each other the hairy eyeball. It makes no sense whatever to say the traffic flows in only one direction. Ill feeling between the sexes means the mood gets uglier on both sides. On the male side, this translates as misogyny. However, when you shine that hypocritical feminist spotlight on the male side alone, while giving women a pass, men will take it unkindly. And why? Because they are not idiots. and so they will rebel. They will kick like mules. They will raise a ruckus. Their disposition will grow worse and worse, as rightly it should. We must define our higher task not as witch-hunting misogyny to extinction, but as preventing the growth of ill feeling between the sexes. An ecological approach to the problem would set the locus of difficulty within the encompassing interrelational space between the sexes and not upon one sex or the other. Any other approach would be sexist. Accordingly, our work belongs to the ecumenical human condition. The first step toward setting the work in motion would be to cut feminism entirely out of the loop. An ideology which encourages one sex to hate the other in either direction cannot plausibly be part of the solution. And that's all I've got to say about that for now. Feidelbogen. Out. Time, women in significant numbers would need to demonstrate that they get it by standing up noisily against feminism and in favor of equitable treatment for men. Failing this, more and more men. Hello, Feidelbogen here, to my fellow workers in the vineyard, worldwide. Greetings. Today I bring you part 3 of a 3-part talk titled Misogyny, a Feminist Production do not eventually show signs of awakening to the crisis and amending their passivity, then it may be predicted that the sum total of misogyny upon the planet will show a net increase. Over the course of, if you haven't yet listened to part 1 and part 2, I'd recommend that you do so. Very well. If broad masses of women are passively implicated in the feminist assault upon men, and if such women will conclude A, that most women don't get it, or B, that they do get it but prefer to benefit passively or complicitly from the status quo. Both A and B will foster